We'll discuss the methodology adopted by the study. We'll discuss the results and analysis per sector. We pick particular sectors to look at, including the economy, agriculture, health, energy, as well as infrastructure. We'll give a summary of our recommendations as well as the conclusion. Methodology, as has already been touched on, we adopt a qualitative approach instead of the usual semi-quantitative approach. And basically, it's because of the paucity of information that we find that we encounter during the first year. We track the implementation of key promises that have been initiated, and we do that on a sectoral basis, as has already been said. And the promises are basically traced through the 2017-2018 budget, as well as the Coordinated Program for Economic and Social Development, 2017 to 2024. We also look at reports from MDAs, those that are available. We look at news articles and basically any piece of information that we can find. We go to the analysis. And we start with the economy. Concerning the economy, the government in its 2016 manifesto indicated that it was going to fulfill 146 promises in all. And the main thrust of these policies was to create a business-friendly and people-friendly economy, and also to create jobs and prosperity for all Ghanaians. Now, we note upon our analysis that within the first year of government, there was an overall macroeconomic stability that was achieved. The key components of macroeconomic stability that we looked at, including the exchange rate, inflation rate, as well as debt. And for the exchange rate, we know that there's been a relatively stable Ghana cedi in the year, with a 4.0 cumulative depreciation in 2017, compared to 4.3% during the same period in 2016. The inflation rate is noted to have fallen from 15.4% as at the year-end 2016 to 11.8% as at year-end 2017. We note that the inflation target for the year 2017 was missed. Debt. Concerning debt, we see that there's a reduction in the debt to GDP ratio from 73% in 2016 to 68.3% in 2017. Now, the general proof of macroeconomic stability is that we have received positive ratings from major credit rating agencies, including Fitch, Standard & Poor's, and the rest. One of the main things that the NPP said in its manifesto was that it was going to enhance fiscal discipline. And the strategy by which it was going to do this was to amend the Public Financial Management Act to allow for the formation of a fiscal council. Now, the fiscal council was treated as the main institution that was necessary to spearhead fiscal discipline. Other objectives were to strengthen expenditure management, to enhance revenue mobilization, and to ensure effective debt management. Well, we know that the fiscal council has not been established within the first year. It was mentioned in the 2017 budget. There are no accounts of activities given to be undertaken for the establishment of the fiscal council in the 2018 budget. And we have a direct question for the government. Is the fiscal council no longer seen as an anchor for setting up and monitoring medium-term fiscal policy? Still on fiscal discipline, we talk about strengthening expenditure management, and we note that some progress has been made. However, the progress that has been made is basically in terms of sensitization concerning key provisions in the Public Financial Management Act, basically limiting expenditure overruns and ensuring that commitment controls are kept. Several activities were listed in the budget to have been undertaken, including the expansion of GIFMIS to new areas, training on program-based budgeting, as well as major sensitization drives on enforcing the mentioned PFMA provisions. We know that while overall sensitization drives are good, it will be better to hasten the implementation, the actual implementations of the provisions in the Public Financial Management Act. Revenue mobilization. In NPP's 2016 manifesto, it promised a lot of tax cuts. I am sure we all remember the 17.5% VAT or NHIL reduced on financial services, domestic airlines, etc. And the general economic principle is once you have tax cuts, all other things being equal, you experience a reduction in revenue. Now, to compensate for this revenue shortfall, the government decided to roll out certain initiatives. including the deployment of the paperless system at the port, self-assessment for VAT, distribution of points of sale services for VAT declaration, among others. We note that mixed results were achieved because the deployment of the initiative that were to enhance revenue mobilization were either delayed or there were implementation challenges thereof. Therefore, looking at the tax cut and revenue mobilization strategy that was taken, we know that within the first year, the government did not achieve the right balance between the tax cut and revenue mobilization. Therefore, it missed its revenue target of 44.9 billion Ghana cedis. We would like to talk about public debt management now, and we know that concerning public debt management, progress was made, and the strategy adopted by the government was largely successful. Particularly, the government decided to introduce new instruments that will lengthen the maturity profile of debt and reduce the cost associated with the debt portfolio. Among the instruments that were used, we have the 15-year domestic bond, we have the 7-year bond, which were needed to reprofile maturing 91-day and 182-day treasuries. Now, the results are clear that we've seen a reduction in debt to GDP ratio from 73% in 2016 to 68.3% in 2017. We look at trade and industry. We note that some progress has been made so far concerning the One District, One Factory initiative. We know that within the first year, no factories have been built. However, the government was able to complete technical and commercial and financial viability analysis on 462 proposals, as was mentioned in its budget. 191 projects were selected to be implemented in 102 districts. There's been a dedicated website that provides details on services rendered by the One District, One Factory Secretariat. It gives details about the application process, amongst others. We see this as a commendable step in the right direction, even though we cannot count any factories as yet. We know that the availability of the website that provides information actually fosters accountability. What we'd like to see is further steps towards the actual establishment of factories, as was said in the manifesto. Trade facilitation. We know that the paperless system has been launched at the ports, and according to the government's 2018 budget, transaction time at the port has been reduced from 2 days to 8 hours. Revenue has also been reported to have increased by 35.4%. However, certain key stakeholders that use the port know that the challenges at the port still persist. And we would like to find out if this is an indication of a lack of understanding of the entire paperless process at the port. We note that the government has also launched the excise tax stamp policy. Now, the implementation of this policy actually involves unpacking goods from the container, stamping them, repacking them before the goods are cleared. We note that, given the combination of these two policies, gains that have been made from the paperless system can be eroded because the process of unpacking, stamping, and repacking potentially has, it has the potential to delay the process in the at the ports. Therefore, we say that government must focus on achieving the right balance between these two policies, that's the paperless policy as well as the excise tax stamp policy. Tourism. We know that several governments or past administrations have promised the tourism industry what we like to call an extreme makeover. The NPP in its 2016 manifesto also did the same. However, we know that very little progress has been made. What the government has done is to organize or to attend several activities and fairs that were intended to boost domestic tourism. We note, however, that these activities are not enough to actually address the core challenges faced by the industry, which include deplorable roads leading to major tourist sites, non-existence of basic necessities at tourist sites, as well as poor maintenance of tourist sites. We'll talk now about job creation. According to the 2018 budget, several jobs have been created. 10,000 youth have been employed in the artificial pollination project. 3,230 jobs have been created by the Planting for Food and Jobs. 18,000 nurses have been employed. 22,000 teachers have been employed. We note that in our assessment, one thing that we encountered was a lack of data or actual updated results within which we could actually verify these figures that have been mentioned. So even though the government states it, there's no way we can attest to the truth of these jobs that have been created. Further, other initiatives were mentioned by the NPP government, including the National Entrepreneurship and Innovation Plan, which is to supply cheap funds for entrepreneurs, the National Builders Corps. Now we note that the National Builders Corps and generally the initiatives that have been stated, they fall under similar employment modules that have been adopted by past governments. Now what happens with these modules is that they do not guarantee job sustainability, because once a new government comes into power, these initiatives usually expire. We note that there is a need for the government to unify all these programs, to review and expand some of them that have to be expanded. This is to make sure that there's eradication of duplication of efforts. Agriculture. The government has as its main focus increasing agricultural productivity. And we know that some progress has been made concerning the Planting for Food and Jobs program, which is supposed to be the main flagship program of the NPP government. 201,000 farmers were registered after 7 months of launching the program, and 3,230 jobs were created. Looking at the agricultural sector on the whole, we see that there's been some growth, as the sector grew from 3.9% in 2016 to 7% in 2017. This data was over the first 3 quarters of these 2 years. We cannot, however, say how much of the growth in the agricultural sector can actually be attributed to the Planting for Food and Jobs program. Irrigation, one village, one dam. Even though 192 small dams and dugouts were identified in the 2017 budget, there is no report of implementation or actual construction of these dams in the 2018 budget. The 2018 budget actually specifies that there will be 50 small dams and dugouts within the year. We are not sure whether the 50 is a reduction from the initial 192 or whether it will be in addition to the 192, as there is no information on that. Concerning cocoa, the government was able to maintain producer prices even though the global price declined. We talk about fisheries. In the NPP's 2016 manifesto, it said that it was going to make sure that there was transparency in the distribution and supply of premixed fuel. However, within the year, we know that about 200 cases of premixed fuel diversion has been reported. We would like to suggest to the government to have guidelines and reforms that are needed to regulate the premixed fuel trade. We would need a robust private-public partnership for the distribution of premixed fuel. Governance. Concerning governance, the NPP made approximately 73 promises, and it initiated the following: the establishment of the Office of the Special Prosecutor, the recruitment of 499 new personnel into the Ghana prisons, public sensitization on governance areas, as well as the establishment of the Cyber Crime Unit at the CID. We know that on the measures to tackle corruption, some progress has been made. For instance, with the establishment of the Office of the Special Prosecutor, we know that this is commendable as an act to fight corruption within the public service. However, we think that it will be very important to ensure that the roles do not overlap, because there are quite a number of anti-corruption agencies. SHRAJ has its mandate, IOCO has its mandate, and one of the mandates that we realize cuts across is asset recovery. For such a mandate, we have to ensure that there's no overlap so that the OSP can do its job as it's meant to function. We also know that the Office of the Special Prosecutor needs to be buttressed with other anti-corruption measures or initiatives, such as the Right to Information Bill, passing the Right to Information Bill, We look at education. Concerning education, 25 promises were made in the NPP's 2016 manifesto, and several of them have been initiated. including the free SHS policy, the restoration of teacher training allowances, redefinition of basic education, 100% increase in the capitation grant, and the commencement of the review of basic level curriculum. A free SHS policy. We know that some progress has been made as it was rolled out in September 2017. 353,000 students benefited within the first year. However, we have had several implementation challenges, mainly bordering on infrastructure deficit, congestion, inadequate furniture, operational issues, and the like. Our main concerns have to do with the sustainability of funding sources. We know that the free SHS policy is largely funded by the oil revenue, and oil revenue is an unpredictable source because we cannot determine the price and we cannot, to some extent, determine the production. The government proposed in its budget the voluntary education fund as another source of funding for the free SHS policy. Now, I would like to know what is the setup of the fund. What exact issues will it be addressing? Who is going to be the manager of the fund? And we suggest that the VEF be leveraged to meet the infrastructure needs to prevent this dependence on external credit facilities to build infrastructure, because we know that there has been a $40 million loan from the World Bank towards free SHS policy, and there's another loan from Kuwait towards the same, and we'd like to know what those are going to be used for exactly. Also, in the free SHS debate, we look at equity versus equality. We know that issues of access and equality have been addressed to some extent. However, we are concerned about the issue of equity because our students come from different socioeconomic backgrounds and we are providing them with the same amount of resources. This may not necessarily achieve equity. So there's a need for proper targeting because some students may necessarily need more funds than the free SHS is providing. Health. The government made approximately about 45 promises concerning health, and it initiated some of them. So we look at the National Health Insurance Scheme. The overall aim of the government was to restructure the National Health Insurance Scheme. So far, it has made considerable efforts. It has cleared the debt of the sector, of the scheme, from 560 million out of the 1.2 billion, 1.2 billion. However, we know that no further efforts have been made towards the actual restructuring of the scheme. We are hoping that the clearing of the debt is the step in the right direction. The nursing training allowance. We know that the nursing training allowance has been restored. And in 2017, it's reported that 149 million Ghana cedis was allocated to 54,840 nurses. In 2018, the allocation is 312 million. We have a major concern with the nursing training allowance because once the allowance is restored, we know that it can translate into a capping of the number of nurses that are admitted into the nursing training school. And this is indeed what happened in 2017, where the Ministry of Health issued a directive after the training allowances had been restored that the intake for the year 2017 must be reduced by 22%. We see that this might continue in subsequent years, and would like to have the government find a better alternative. Emergency services. The government promised to bolster emergency relief responses. In 2016, the country had only 165 ambulances instead of a required 1,000 to serve the Ghanaian population of about 28 million to 30 million. And out of the 165 ambulances, only 55 of them were in operation in 2017. The government has promised to acquire 275 ambulances by the year end 2018 through its flagship project or initiative, that's the Infrastructure for Poverty Eradication Program. We know that this is commendable. However, we would have wished that this would have taken place within the first year of NPP's government because of the sporadic nature of epidemics and other health emergencies. For instance, a case in point is the outbreak of the H1N1 virus in the Kumasi Academy Secondary School that killed a number of students. We'll talk about energy. About 37 promises were made concerning the energy sector, and a couple of them were initiated, including the restructuring of the energy sector debt, reduction of electricity tariffs, allocation of oil revenues towards infrastructure, education, health, and agriculture. And also there was local capacity development in the oil and gas sector. Concerning the restructuring of debt, we note that progress has been made. The NPP itself reported in this 2018 budget that the debt has been halved. That means that it has reduced from 10 billion Ghana cedis to 5 billion Ghana cedis. And this was a result of a combination of the energy bonds that were issued to refinance the energy sector debt, as well as the energy sector levies. Even though we note that this is commendable, a major concern emerges if net debt accumulation over time remains positive. While efforts are being made to restructure debt, we note that not as much effort is being put into making sure that the power utilities do not continue to accumulate further debt. And the debt accumulating factors we note still remain, particularly the efficiency of the Electricity Company of Ghana is still in question. There are still no commitments towards securing fuel supply for thermal generation, which has increased over recent times. Because of this, there are implications for other policies that have been stated by the government. For instance, the cash waterfall mechanism is going to dwell on revenue that is supposed to be collected by the power utilities. Now, if this revenue is not collected, we know that the cash waterfall mechanism might be undermined. The reduction in electricity tariffs could also undermine debt restructuring efforts, because insofar as the electricity tariffs contain the energy sector levy, we know that once we reduce them, it will affect how much we are accumulating by ESLA, and that is going to affect how the whole restructuring process is going to go. Concerning the allocation of oil revenue, we were excited when the government reorganized the annual budget funding amount to focus on education, health, agriculture, and infrastructure. We know that this is commendable. However, a word of caution was thrown to the government concerning the priority area called the road, rail, and other critical infrastructure priority area. This is because in previous administrations, well, the past government, we know that they had a similar sector, which was the road and other infrastructure sector, and that led to the thin spread of oil revenues because there were several projects that were put under that particular priority area, and some of them were not able to be tracked. We know that the NPP government might have repeated the exact same thing because revenues from the oil revenues have been channeled towards funding the Ministry of Special Development Initiatives, which is supposed to be the oversight body over the implementation of the Infrastructure for Poverty Eradication program. Now we know that these IPEP, it has a lot of government flagship programs underneath it, including the One Village, One Dam, the One District, One Factory, something known as Small Business Development. Now these programs themselves have not been clearly defined. We do not know how many projects are going to be undertaken within the year. There's no catalog of the projects that are going to be undertaken. Therefore, if we are channeling oil revenues towards these, how do we know exactly how much has been spent on which project, where, at what time? It is recommended that the government will select and catalog a number of projects per initiative that will be undertaken per year so that we can track how much of the oil revenue is going in there, and this will enhance accountability. We know that the government has launched and has begun the Accelerated Oil Capacity Development Program, as well as the Ghana Upstream Sector Internship Program, and this is commendable. Under the AOCDP, 1,000 Ghanaians will be trained annually, including 200 SMEs and 300 employees within the public sector. Also, 43 interns have been placed in upstream oil and gas companies. Now we have a concern here because we know that the oil and gas sector has an enclave nature and is only able to absorb so much. We are wondering the kind of needs assessment that was undertaken to be able to say that 1,000 Ghanaians will be employed annually via these projects. Further, what even solidifies our argument is that we ourselves, we had difficulty in finding year-on-year employment data for the sector in question, even though we asked several key stakeholders. That is a worrying picture because once the need assessment has not been critically enforced, has not been undertaken, we do not know what information or what is informing these two strategies. Therefore, local capacity development might be undermined somewhat. We look at infrastructure. Government made approximately or about 73 promises concerning infrastructure, and it initiated a couple of them. Its main focus was mainstreaming ICT into the public service delivery in Ghana. Now, the initiatives undertaken under these include the automation of clearance processes at the Ghana port, the National Identification System, the National Digital Addressing System. It also undertook several other things, including the maintenance of existing roads, the construction of some railway lines. We note that progress has been made with a paperless system at the port. The clearance process has been fully automated, and as has been mentioned earlier, the time for clearance has been reduced and revenue has increased. However, given further investigation, we note and we've been told that the risk clearance system at the port needs to be robust, because that is what feeds who is a compliant importer and who is not a compliant importer. Once the risk engine clears somebody or clears an importer, the importer is able to bring in his or her goods without the need to go through inspection. We note that any glitch with this particular risk engine can create a problem where we have illegal goods coming into the system, or prohibited goods or restricted goods. We also note that there needs to be continuous sensitization for stakeholders, because the freight forwarders and as well as other key users of the port, as we have noted already, have complained that things are not really as beautiful as they are painted to seem. The National Identification System as well as the National Digital Addressing System. We know that little progress has been made. Even though the NIS was launched in 2017, the rollout has been stalled by the need to amend the National Identity Register, and also the subsequent passage of the supporting legislative instrument. The concerns with this is that it has a knock-on effect on other policies that border around revenue mobilization, because the government was looking to using these two systems, that's the identification system as well as the addressing system, to rope in the informal sector. Once the informal sector is roped in, we know that we widen our tax base, we are able to collect more taxes, and this enhances revenue mobilization. So we note that the fact that the national identification system as well as the addressing system has been delayed means that there's going to be a delay in revenue mobilization. Finally, we are at our recommendations, and we'll give a summary of our recommendations so far. With the economy, we know that there's a need to actually move to the enforcement of the Public Financial Management Act and the sanctions thereof. We know that there's a need for sensitization on the paperless system. We know that there's a need to create a database on labor and employment so that we are able to verify our job creation figures. We know that there's a need to actually expedite some of the policy initiatives, including the One Village, One Dam project and the One District, One Factory project. Concerning governance, we suggest that the government would also look at other innovative measures that will buttress the Office of the Special Prosecutor. For instance, in Rwanda, Zambia, India, they sign integrity pacts for stakeholders that makes sure that it eliminates corruption in the public procurement process. There's also the need to expedite the Right to Information Bill. In education, we note that the Voluntary Education Fund should be used to augment the GET Fund in addressing infrastructure deficit that the free SHS policy faces. We also note that tax revenue should be the main source of funding for free SHS, as that one is more stable. Oil revenue should only be secondary. Concerning health, we know that there's a need for further innovative strategies to sustain the National Health Insurance Scheme in order to prevent the delay in payment of claims, which has been the main issue with the National Health Insurance Scheme. We also know that there's a need, as an innovative strategy, the government can consider operating the health insurance through telecommunications companies. This will improve access to the informal sector. Concerning the nursing training allowance, we note that there might be a need to amend the Student Loan Act that will allow for nursing trainees to access student loans to be able to see themselves through school rather than fully depending on the training allowance. In energy, we know that there's a need to achieve a pragmatic balance between debt restructuring and net debt accumulation. Also, there's a need to document the standardized guidelines for project selection and to catalog the number of projects per year that will be pursued under IPEP. We know that there's a need to build a store of employment data in the oil and gas sector that will inform all the local content or capacity strategies adopted by the government. In infrastructure, we know that the risk engine of the paperless system has to be made robust, and there's the need to fast-track the implementation or the passage of the legislative instrument that will support the deployment of the national identification system. Our conclusion is that overall, we believe that government has achieved some reasonable progress in the fulfillment of its manifesto promises. What we must focus on is that we must move from the process of just checking things off the list of manifesto promises to the actual solving of problems. And one thing that we notice that this is going to happen if we're able to coordinate all policies and programs and initiatives so that our ministries, departments, and agencies and all stakeholders concerned are speaking to one another. Thoughtful coordination amongst MDAs should be a priority.